It impacts people that have had farmlands for years and years and years. It also impacts the major wetlands. You have a train running through a tourist-based business. It's not going to be successful. My concerns are what happens to our roadways? They're going to biseect our roads. We have dead-end roads. How are ambulances, fire, police? How are they going to get to us? What costs are we now going to bear to reroute school buses, garbage, recycling? Canada explodes after a $90 billion train wreck barrels straight through the livelihoods of Canadian farmers because nothing says smart infrastructure like slicing up generational farmland and calling it progress. Tonight, we're exposing how this so-called nation-building project is leaving rural families to pay the real price. What problem are we solving? So, what's the issue? What's the big solution? And is this worth it? As far as like I'm all for infrastructure. The idea of it is fantastic, but the implementation makes no sense to me. Let's get straight into it. For months now, Canadians have been told that this $90 billion high-speed rail project branded as Alto is a bold, visionary investment in our future. We're told it will connect Toronto to Quebec City, running at 300 km per hour, move 18 million passengers a year, reduce travel time, cut emissions, and somehow magically pay for itself over time. That's the sales pitch. But when you actually step outside the press conferences and walk into community halls in places like Peterborough and along Rice Lake, the tone is very different. Out there, people aren't cheering. They're bracing for impact. Behind me, we are at the McDonald Community Center to take in an open house being put on by Alto. Now, if you haven't heard, Alto is the proposed high-speed rail line that will connect Toronto to Quebec City, spanning 1,000 kilometers. But it comes with a hefty price tag, roughly $90 billion to see it through. And I'll say this clearly, I'm not anti-infrastructure. I'm definitely not anti-train. I'm not someone who thinks Canada should stop building things, but I am absolutely against bulldozing generational farmland, destabilizing wetlands, dividing rural communities, and gambling billions of taxpayer dollars on projections that literally don't add up. Now, it's proposed that the trains will run at a speed of 300 km per hour and service roughly 18 million riders annually. But there's major concerns about the land that will be expropriated privately owned property utilized by hunters, anglers, and pristine farmland that has been held within families for generations. Because once this starts, there's no rewind button. Let's talk about what's really at stake. This rail line is projected to cut through privately owned land, not vacant wasteland, not empty scrub, but working farms, tourist businesses, resorts, and family properties that have been held for generations. These aren't abstract parcels on a planning map. These are century farms. These are retirement homes people spent their life savings building. We're asking people what concerns they may have with the high-speed train and why they came out tonight. We have a business actually on the north shore of Rice Lake, right in the dead center of the path that they're studying. So it's generational, it's livelihoods of people, it's a tourist-based business, and there's a lot like us. I think generally people in Peter are good with it. I don't think Peter should be on the list. These are tourist operations on Rice Lake that depend on quiet water, natural beauty, and open access. And now those owners are being told that expropriation could begin almost immediately once approvals are finalized. 30 days notice under federal authority. That's it. Imagine being told within a month that the land your grandparents worked on, the businesses that your parents built, the house that you plan to retire in could all be partially taken. I think this has been too long coming, and normally I'm the kind of person who puts the environment first. But I've been waiting for so long to get a train to go to Quebec or Toronto or wherever that don't want to put environmental concerns aside, but I'd really be happy if they were able to move this forward quickly. Maybe it'll be sliced in half for a rideway. You might not lose the whole property, they say. Just a strip, just enough to run a 300 km an hour electric train through it every few minutes, as if that makes it better. Supporters argue that large projects require concessions, that sometimes land has to be acquired for the greater good. Fine, I get that, but the burden of that greater good seems to fall almost entirely on rural communities that will not see proportional benefit. They got to build it quick. What happens to my well when they start hammering on concrete and that kind of stuff? Never mind the fact, like this afternoon, I had the privilege of listening to trumpeter swans in my backyard on the water, and what happens to them? What problem are we solving? So what's the issue? What's the big solution? And is this worth it? As far as like, I'm all for infrastructure. The idea of it is fantastic, but the implementation makes no sense to me. If you don't live in Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal, or Quebec City, or if the train doesn't stop in your backyard, what exactly are you gaining? Faster travel for somebody else. And then there's the environmental contradiction. We're told this is a green infrastructure, climate-friendly, future-focused, yet the proposed route cuts through wetlands and agricultural zones that actively absorb carbon and support biodiversity, going to create community relationships, but they're going to do it, and then they're going to take your property. Yeah, and the economy doesn't really warrant it in Peterborough. In the last year, we've lost businesses. We've lost with Minute Maid. We've lost with Siemens. They're talking about G being torn down. Based on conversations I've had with the realtors, my property value will go down about 50%. There are concerns about diverting creeks, restructuring parts of the Trent River system, and installing multiple electrical substations to power the line. Farmers are asking, like, what happens to drainage? Property owners are asking, what happens to wells when heavy construction begins? Residents are asking about vibration impact on foundations that were never built to withstand high-speed rail shock waves. These are not hysterical questions. They're incredibly practical ones. There's some farmers and hunters and anglers that are really concerned about their land being expropriated. Have you heard anything about that? No, I haven't. No. But I can't blame them. Land appropriation. That's the main thing. When you're building a massive project like this, like some things have to happen. Like some concessions have to be made. Either the government has to pay more money or Alto's paying more money for these people. Emergency access is another issue that hasn't been answered clearly. When rail corridors bisect rural roads, what happens to ambulance routes? What happens to fire response times? Some homeowners were required to be within a certain distance of a fire hall just to qualify for insurance. If access roads are cut off or rerouted, do they lose coverage? Are municipalities expected to build new service corridors at their own expense? Do you have concerns about the land expropriation component of all of this? 100%. All of it. Like, it's just, to me, it's just, for lack of a better term, BS. And like I said, there's multiple resorts on Rice Lake that are just like us, that are in the path, and our neighbors as well. There's beautiful farmland across the road from us, and that could all potentially be affected as well. And that's all the food we eat and the milk we drink, and it's huge impact. And speaking of expense, let's address the elephant in the room. $90 billion. That figure alone should trigger the highest level of scrutiny. We are not talking about a few $100 million. We are talking about one of the largest infrastructure commitments in Canadian history. Supporters say that it's a generational investment. Critics say it's a generational debt sentence. Some projections suggest a 47-year subsidy horizon before meaningful return, nearly a half a century. Just here, I did heard from a farmer that wasn't too happy. Do you have property that might be caught in the crossfire? You don't know yet. I'm told that we do. They tend not to take whole chunks of property, but rather just go for right away. They're going to have to divert creeks. So what's that do to the surface water? I had to get a permit from Orca to put in a dock, but they're going to basically completely restructure the Trent River system. Flooding costs canals. Like, I just don't see them being able to pull this off. So when someone asks who's flipping the bill, that's not cynicism. That's just responsibility. We already have a national rail operator, VIC Rail, and by its own reporting, only around 30% of trains have been arriving on time in some recent assessments, largely because freight takes priority on shared tracks. The pitch for Alto is that dedicated high-speed lines solve that problem. But skeptics point out something else. Instead of fixing what we have, we're building something brand new. You're going to have like Century Family Farms cut in half. How do you even access part of your property? The spend money we now got. Why do we need it? We already got via rail. Via this year reported like 30% of their trains made it on time and on schedule. Yeah, I know. Well, that's part of the problem because you're sharing with freight. Yes, freight takes priority. People can't afford to take a high-speed train somewhere. Now, they did say it was going to be, it's not going to be, it'll be affordable, but I'm sorry. Eventually, they'll jack that up too, right? Far more expensive. It's potentially cannibalizing the existing system. Then there are comparisons that people don't want to hear, but they can't ignore. California's high-speed rail project has faced years of delays, ballooning costs, and political controversy. The England Crosstown LRT in Toronto went billions over budget and years behind schedule. Ottawa's LRT has had repeated service interruptions and operational challenges. They're going to cannibalize Via Rail. So Via Rail, their proposal, according to their business case, was to turn ownership of Via Rail over to the province. I mean, it's going to be to us. Not to mention, there's going to be, 5 or 12 electrical substations that are going to have to power this thing. I'm assuming Hydro One's not paying for that. I'm assuming that's going to be the ratepayers in rural Ontario. Cost-wise, from what they're already involved in, this will never happen. So why are we even discussing this? These examples don't prove Alto will fail, but they do show a pattern. Mega projects in North America often exceed timelines and budgets dramatically. So when residents say, why is this any different? They're not being obstructionist. They're being realistic. There's a political layer here that can't be separated from the conversation. Some critics frame Alto as a federal liberal legacy project with grand nation-building initiatives meant to define an era. I think their calculations are completely wrong. I think we're being ramroded and railroaded and ramrodded, or however you want to say that. Yeah, it's a done deal. You can tell. Others hope a future conservative government would scrape it together. That political tout-gouffre adds even more uncertainty. If government changes midstream, what happens? Do we end up with half-built corridors and stranded land acquisitions? History in Quebec shows that land has been expropriated before for projects that never materialized. The fear is not imaginary, so let's talk about property value. Real estate professionals in affected areas have reportedly already warned homeowners. So you think that what they're doing here is all just kind of for show, and it doesn't so much matter. Exactly. Some of the calculations that they were telling us just doesn't make any sense. It's based on a 30% population growth, but according to the Parliamentary Budget Office, it's going to be flattened down 6%. So who's flipping the bill for this? Proximity to this proposed line could slash property values in some cases by estimates as high as 50%. Whether that exact number holds or not, the perception alone can freeze markets. Who wants to buy a rural retreat if a high-speed rail corridor might roar right behind the tree line? Now here's the other side, because there is one. Some residents genuinely want this project. They're tired of slow intercity travel. They see economic opportunity. My suggestion to them was take Peter off the map because it won't impact all that and ruin our wetlands, our environment, even the homelands that have been around for years and generations. You know, they talk about this is a generational project. I don't think it's a generational project that it's once in a lifetime. I think it's a generational project because that's how long it's going to take us to pay for this. They argue that Canada cannot commute globally without modern infrastructure. They believe high-speed rail is long overdue and that countries in Europe and Asia have proven that it works when done correctly. They hope that bringing in international expertise will prevent the mistakes seen in past Canadian transit builds. And that optimism does deserve respect, but optimism cannot replace transparency. The projected 18 million annual riders, is that conservative or inflated? That land acquisition phase would begin almost immediately. Yeah. And the other concern, right, is C-15 and the lack of any recourse if there is expropriation. As I understand, it's a 30-day notice, and that's it. So we don't know details about that as well. I don't know if that's the full story. And to his point, right, if there's business losses there, like the annual income that comes from a season, like that's huge. So How do we recoup that? The population growth assumptions underpinning RERship models, are they realistic in light of flattening forecasts, the cost escalation risk? Is it fully baked into the public narrative? Or are we being shown best case scenarios? Because here's what concerns me most. Once expropriation starts, the debate effectively ends. Once land is taken and contracts are signed, the momentum becomes unstoppable. Even if it costs double, even if RERship falls short, even if operating subsidies balloon, we're trying to up the steel industry and try to keep those people employed, and all that kind of stuff is really what this amounts to. This is a counteraction to to tariffs that are hitting us. If I'm within a kilometer, am I afraid my house is going to get hit? Like, I just don't trust this thing. They were not built to withstand this type of vibration, right? You know, foundations could crumble, and that's why the anger feels so intense in these communities. It's not just about trains, it's about trust. When residents say the consultations feel like a done deal, that's a red flag. Public engagement cannot be a box-checking exercise. If decisions are already locked in, then open houses are theater. We are constantly told this is about connecting Canadians, but connection should not mean sacrificing the very communities that feed us, power us, or preserve our natural spaces. California's high-speed rail, complete failure. They've seen no riders, billions of dollars over budget, way over time. Eglinton Crosstown in Toronto, the LRT, billions over budget, no riders, destroyed small businesses throughout this construction fiasco. And our own Via Rail can't even get people on time at their destination. So why is this any different? We don't know, really. And, you know, this is a long-term plan. There could be changes in government in that period of time. You know, and thinking about sort of the areas in Quebec, too, I understand there's areas that have been expropriated for airports and that have never happened. And so this is a huge, expensive project. Farmers are not anti-progress. Rural Canadians are not anti-future. They're asking for balance. Is there an alternative route that minimizes farmland disruption? Can compensation models reflect true long-term loss, not just surface value? Can emergency service guarantees be legally codified before construction begins? Can independent cost audits be made public annually? These are not radical demands. At the end of the day, this debate forces a bigger question. What kind of country are we building? I really hope that Alto has, taken some learnings from postmortems in that case down in California, in the cases that we've had in Toronto, in Ottawa. We're walking downtown Ottawa all the time because the LRT is not up and running. And I'm pretty sure this is the same rebranded company that's involved in building this proposed project as to what they have in Ottawa already, one where urban corridors dictate terms to rural regions, or one where development is negotiated, not imposed. High-speed rail might be part of Canada's future. It might be even necessary. But if it comes at the cost of fractured communities, destabilized ecosystems, and a debt burden our grandchildren will still be servicing decades from now, then Canadians have every right to pause, because progress that leaves half the country feeling steamrolled isn't progress at all. It's division at 300 kilometers per hour. It's a liberal policy, a liberal program. It's all federally driven, and honestly, I just hope the Conservatives get in and hacks the whole thing. And before a single shovel hits the ground, we need answers, not slogans, not branding, not glossy renderings of sleek trains flying across empty landscape, but hard numbers, enforceable projections, and genuine consent from the people whose land lies directly in this path. That's not anti-rail. That's literally just accountability. Going to reduce travel time by 90 minutes, and it cost a $90 billion. I don't know whose time is worth $1 billion a minute. I really don't. When I moved to the town, it was a big issue for me to get insurance because I had to be close enough to a fiery hall. Well, if I'm cut off, if I'm a kilometer down the road, but I'm cut off from the service, are we going to build a new EMS service, fire service for all these communities? I'm nauseous. I feel like I've been kicked in the gut. I built a beautiful retirement home. We were going to spend the rest of our lives just living in the country, enjoying nature. And until Canadians get it, this $90 billion project, it won't be just a train line debate. It will remain exactly what many rural residents already call it, a train wreck in the making.